let's take a look at our crappy culture. Now, let's talk about Indigenous Peoples Day, all right? Because this is in California. This is now officially an Indigenous Peoples Day because they look at Columbus as, the terrible white Christian imperialist coming over and killing the nice, wonderful, indigenous peoples. Now, all of that is debunked. I think Michael Knowles actually has a good piece, hard to believe. It's written in crayon, but it's, Knowles, you got to give him a break sometimes. I want him dead. I want his family dead. Anyway, he wrote a good piece showing that Columbus was, as he was, an incredible navigator, a heroic sailor who braved, just incredible. Those ships were like the size of my desk that they were sailing in. They sailed across an ocean not knowing what they would find. Unbelievable. He was a much better governor than people give him credit for. A lot of the atrocities that were committed against the natives, he was fighting against a lot of the time. But that is not the point. That is not, I think that's all true, but it's not the point. The point is this myth of the noble savage, okay? Here is a weird thing I want you to think about. People who believe in Christianity, who at least have some connection to the story of Adam and Eve. Some people think it's literally true. Some people, like me, think it is the most profound story about human nature ever told. Doesn't matter. People who are invested in Adam and Eve look to the future, right? We look to the future. If you think about Paradise Lost, the greatest poem ever, one of the greatest poems in the English language about Adam and Eve, it ends with this kind of hopeful note of Adam and Eve wandering off into the world, to start history, to begin history. We look to the future, not just in the future life, not just the life after death, but we look to the future of man. We think that man can be better, that he is moving back toward the garden through the knowledge of good and evil, going back to God and the paradise. Then if you look at people whose only hope is Darwin, who believe only in evolution, that evolution is a random process. I believe in evolution, but I just don't think it's a random process. I don't know how you would even know it was a random process. All you can say is it looks random to us, just like, when I go in and clear out an ant's nest in my house, it looks random to them. It looks like a random disaster. They don't know what I'm doing. They haven't got any idea of my purpose. I don't know why they think it's random, but they say it looks random to them. Why is it they are the ones who talk about the noble savage? They believe that if we could just go back, things were wonderful before we got there. Before the white man came, it was wonderful. Let me give you Darwin. He made those those fantastic journeys on the Beagle, the HMS Beagle, and that's how he gathered all the information for his theory. Three of the passengers on the Beagle were from Tierra del Fuego, and they were natives who had been brought to England and kind of Anglified, and they had been dressed up and kind of half mockingly, but also sort of seriously. I think they'd met the king and everything, and part of the job of the Beagle was to bring them back to Tierra del Fuego. When Darwin got there, he saw the natives, the indigenous peoples, okay? And Darwin was often attacked for believing man was descended from the ape, right? They would say, was it on your mother's side or your father's side that you were descended from the ape? Whatever. So he looked at the natives of Tierra del Fuego, and this is what he said. These men were absolutely naked and bedaubed with paint. Their long hair was tangled, their mouths frothed with excitement, and their expression was wild, startled, and distrustful. They possessed hardly any arts, and like wild animals lived on what they could catch. They had no government and were merciless to everyone not of their own small tribe. I would as soon be descended from an old baboon as from a savage who delights to torture his enemies, offers up bloody sacrifices, practices infanticide without remorse, treats his wives like slaves, knows no decency, and is haunted by the grossest superstition. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day from Charles Darwin. This was a myth. A lot of times they blame Rousseau for the myth of the noble savage, but I always know, that's how I always know when I'm reading your book that the guy hasn't actually read Rousseau, because this happens a lot. He never said it. That was not his theory. His theory was a lot more complicated than that. But this was a theory that people began to have as civilization advanced, okay? And guys like Dickens used to hate. Charles Dickens would talk about the Indians, and they would say, "Oh, the Indians." We're talking about the American Indians, and they would say, "Oh, the Indians. These are the noble savage. This is what people could be if we could just strip them of civilization." And he was like, the best thing that could happen to these people is that they be civilized out of existence. Steven Pinker, the science writer, he gives a TED talk about violence and how we've gotten less violent as we've become more civilized. We have that chart. He has a chart. I got this chart from Pinker. Right. Here is the best they can judge of native peoples before civilization, and what percentage of their men were killed in warfare. At the worst, it's 60%. Over half the men were killed in warfare. And if, depending on the tribe, it gets less and less until the least tribe, the Jabusi, is under 10%. Then you look down at Europe and the US in the 20th century, okay? Now we're talking about death camps, we're talking about the atom bomb, we're talking about World War I and World War II. The percentage of male deaths it looks like about 3%. 3%. Civilization, for all its discontents, for all its mechanisms of death, doesn't kill people, is not as violent, is not as savage. Mona Charen was talking about this on Thursday, about the fact that women have won such victories in the way that men and women interact. These apes that we're supposed to be descended from, the men beat the women, the male apes beat the women, and the women search for the ape that beats her the most because she knows that's the guy who can defend her children. And she tries to sleep with as many of these big bruisers as she can so they won't kill her child, because a lot of times the apes get jealous and they'll kill the child so the mother will go back into heat again and they can get her pregnant instead of the other ape who got her pregnant. This is what we come from. This is what we're descended from people who act like that. And it's, if we have gotten better, it's because of consciousness. It's because of civilization. It's because of giving women rights and listening to what is going on, except for Harvey Weinstein. But I mean, the rest of us listening to what, women are saying and how relationships work. My point about Adam and Eve, I just finished this wonderful book about Adam and Eve called The Rise and Fall of Adam and Eve by Stephen Greenblatt. And Stephen Greenblatt is a wonderful scholar and a wonderful writer that I admire very much. And I disagree with him a lot. Not a lot, but often at times I disagree with him. He's a Shakespeare expert. And he writes this book about Adam and Eve. And the narrative of his book about Adam and Eve is kind of this myth gets taken too seriously, and then it is taken so seriously and is made so human that it finally occurs to people as science rises that it's all ridiculous, and it then gets abandoned. But I have a totally different, I believe in both Darwin and the story of Adam and Eve. I believe both of these things are absolutely true. I believe the story of Adam and Eve is a story about who we are, and it is God's story about who we are. I mean, think about it. It's always very mysterious when people say, well, why didn't God want us to have eat the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil? Why didn't he want us to know good from evil? That doesn't seem right. But I think if you think about it, one of the things that God keeps saying when he creates things is that they're good. He says, I made this world and it's good. The world is good, right? But when they started to see good and evil in a world that God declared good, they were seeing something that was less than he had made them to see. He had made them to see that his world, that all things work to the good for those who love God, but instead they started putting themselves first, putting their judgments first, their judgments over God's knowledge that this whole thing somehow, even though it's painful sometimes for us, even though we can't understand it all the time, that this whole thing works to the good. The story of Adam and Eve is the story of our spirit. It's the story of our souls. It's our story of our march from innocence through knowledge back to God, back to becoming, as Jesus said, like children in the kingdom of heaven. That is the story. Greenblatt makes this point in his book that one of the things that happened to Darwin used to love poetry. He loved Shakespeare. He loved Paradise Lost. He loved Milton. As he became more and more immersed in his theory, he lost his love of poetry. He couldn't read it anymore. And he said, I've become a machine for taking facts and making theories. That's all I am now. Well, the reason was he lost the narrative, okay? He got the facts. I salute him. They're wonderful. Science is a wonderful thing, but he lost the sense of purpose that people who believe in God have. That's why when we started, I opened the show with this guy saying that he used to be a weed and porn addicted atheist nihilist like everybody else. I love that line. That was one of my favorite things about the post. It's just like everybody else, like everybody. And then he found Christ and now he can't stop smiling. We are moving forward in spirit. We're moving forward in spirit. And that is why when we look at the world as it is now, we know it's better than it was. It's better than it was because we have moved forward in spirit. From the garden, hopefully, back to the garden in a life beyond this. This is Columbus Day. We should be celebrating. We should be celebrating that the arts, civilization, technology, wisdom, intelligence, reading, language all came to this place of cannibalism and savagery and replaced it. I know that injustices were done. I know that bad things were done to people. I know that if it happened again tomorrow, bad things would happen again. But there's no going back. We don't want to go back. This is Columbus Day. Happy Columbus Day, and we'll see you again tomorrow. I'm Andrew Klavan. This is The Andrew Klavan Show.